So friends, now when we know the patterns in which sensory losses are generally clinically presented and clinically found in examination for various components of the nervous system like the peripheral nerves or the radiculopathy or the spinal cord or the higher order brain stem and thalamus and finally the cerebral cortex. Now the point is those were the patterns, but we can establish a pattern only when we know that one sensation is gone or the other sensation is gone, or one sensation of one part is gone or the one sensation of the other part is gone. What I mean to emphasize here is that finally we have to do the sensory testing or the testing of the different sensations of different parts of the body. Now there are some peculiarities that are inherently attached with the sensory system examination, and before we start this examination we need to highlight those and we need to consider and we need to keep them always in mind once we are doing a sensory system examination or we are reviewing a sensory system examination or we are referring to a sensory system examination that is done previously either by yourself or by some other clinician at some other center. So the first is that the sensory system examination is highly dependent on the patient's response, and this again has two factors. One is the patient's voluntary and the other is patient's unconscious, I would say, status. So what I mean to say that, suppose we are doing a heat sensation test. Now when we do a heat sensation test for someone who is working in a furnace, जो कोई भट्टी में काम करता है, और for a lady who is working in kitchen always, maybe her heat sensation is not very distinct for the fingertips because they are always used in handling hot objects, hot utensils. So maybe you will find that the sensation there is less, especially the discrimination of the temperature of very smaller range is less. अब कोई लेडी जो गर्म बर्तनों से और गर्म चीज़ों पे काम करती हैं उनको आप 45 डिग्री का टेम्परेचर दो, फिर 50 डिग्री का दो, फिर 35 डिग्री, तो शायद वो फ़र्क नहीं कर पाएंगे. हो सकता है अगर आप 70 का दोगे तो फ़र्क कर पाएंगे, बट इफ़ यू गिव minor temperature changes, maybe they will not respond. So this is something unconscious. Second would be there are some enthusiasts who would always say that no, it is not high, or who would always say that no, it is not very low, because they try to show that they can take any temperature, any low or any high temperature. You can have the other way possibility also. Suppose someone tries to exaggerate his disease or his symptoms, so for a slight change in temperature he or she would say that, oh my god, I am getting huge heat, or I am going to burn. So something like that can also happen. So basically it depends absolutely on the patient's response, how much patient cooperate and how much is he motivated to cooperate, and what is his overall ability to communicate also, because finally the patient will say that I am having this kind of sensation. So if you give a light touch and he felt a crude touch, so and if he is not able to communicate it properly, so maybe you are slightly confused in your recording of examination. So that is one part. If to summarize, I would say that the sensory system examination is completely or largely dependent on the patient's desire, motivation, cooperation, his own understanding of the test, his mental status, his outlook about his problem and all. Then the other feature of a sensory system examination which is clinically found is non-uniformity. The test is highly variable in its finding. So if today you do a test with some touch or with some vibration equipment, and patient says that yes, I am able to find it. Maybe tomorrow or maybe after some time, the same test with the same procedure may not give similar results. There can be two reasons again for it. One is maybe the patient is more habituated, so habituation is a factor. आज पेशेंट को आपने पहली बार कुछ किया या 2 बार कुछ किया तो शायद उसको उसका ज़्यादा फ़र्क महसूस हुआ. Tomorrow maybe he is more habituated and matured and he expected some vibration, but now because he is expecting, so maybe his expectations are slightly higher and he is not able to gauge the vibrations properly this time. Or now he understands that if I say yes or if I say no for this test, how a clinician is going to consider my condition. So if he wants again to exaggerate his condition, previously he said yes, assuming that saying yes will be bad for a clinical picture, but he realized that he has done a mistake. उसको तो ना बोलना चाहिए था, ना बोलने से उसकी बीमारी ज़्यादा बड़ी मानी जाएगी या हाँ बोलने से उसकी बीमारी कम बड़ी मानी जाएगी. तो हो सकता है पहली बार में उन्होंने कुछ कहा, दूसरी बार में उन्होंने कुछ कहा. Number 2 is the point in the procedure itself, because as I said, all these procedures are done clinically by the therapist. So suppose today you do a vibration test with a tuning fork, tomorrow you do the same test with the same tuning fork, but you strike it in a different manner. So the vibrations produced or the time taken to transmit the vibration from your tuning fork to the person is variable. You are not doing it in a controlled laboratory surroundings. So maybe in your procedure itself, the sensation or the intensity of sensation is changed from one session to other session, and there is no uniformity likewise in the outcome of the test. So generally we say that it is almost impossible to overrule the variabilities, and the responses or the outcome of such tests are highly non-uniform, even if they are done with a standard procedure by a same clinician on a same patient. So these are the things. Then another factor is the patient may get fatigue also. So this is not a muscular fatigue, this is a fatigue of mental status, this is a fatigue of the sensorium. So if you do a very detailed and a tedious exam, I have always said that in a clinical examination, do not go by a theory rule book. Try to do an examination in 2-3 components. One is the component of observation and interview and history taking of the patient. That is something passive, it is not done actively on the patient, and in the process you can highlight the problems of the patient. You, in most of the conditions, you have a diagnosis beforehand and you can relate that what are the general findings of sensory losses in such a condition. तो पहला आपका जो component होता है, that is basically observation and the passive component. After that passive component or during that passive component, you can do a partially active component of your examination in which you can do the screening. So a good screening solves lot many purposes before you enter into an actual examination. So by just touching the patient during the interview process, or by just touching something hot or cold, or by just asking hot water or cold water to the patient, or pricking a small thing on his back or some area, you can do all these things during the conversation without making the patient realize that you are doing examination on the patient. You can put a foot on his foot so that he gets a pressure, he gets some pain, और you can see the response of the patient. आप अचानक उसके पैर पे पैर रख दें या आप अचानक उसको कोई ठंडी चीज़ लगा दें पीछे से या आगे से, तो आपको देखेंगे कि वो रिस्पॉन्स उसका जो आता है that is a natural response. But if you start the examination, you ask the patient to lie down on a plinth, or you ask the patient to sit on a examination chair or a patient stool, now the patient is in that mind frame that okay, now the examination has started. So now if he wants to manipulate or if he wants to influence the findings of the test, he has a better opportunity. जब उसको पता है मेरा examination हो रहा है तो वो उसको बढ़ा चढ़ा करके भी बता सकता है. But if you do these screening and if you do these indirect techniques, maybe it will give you hint about the underlying problem. The highlighting of the areas or the sensations is already done, and now you are set to roll out your detailed examination if it is required, or you can take a clinical decision on the basis of your screening test. Now, as I say that an efficient clinical examination is always preconceived on the background of a anatomical and physiological framework. So here there is a bit of anatomy and physiology in front of you. First of all, we need to understand what is this dermatome. So this is basically, if I draw some part of your body, let's say I'm drawing the elbow, and this is your arm. So if this is your arm roughly, and this is your hand, so any part of the body will be divided into certain skin areas that cover that body, and this, let's say if this is one area I have tried to demarcate. Now this is your dermatome, and physiologically they say that dermatome is a complete closed border skin area which is supplied by a single spinal nerve. And when I say a spinal nerve, I mean to say a radicular nerve. Should we go back to in some anatomy? A spine, a dorsal root ganglion, and central process of the axon enters into the dorsal part of the spine. This is, you know that this is your sensory area, the dorsal area. This is the ventral and the anterior part, that is mainly the motor part, though we have some tracts here also. So this part. So if this axon supplies, let's say now this is supplying this complete, and if this is the level, let's say C5, that means the fifth cervical spinal segment. This is not vertebral level we are talking about. This is the fifth spinal segment level, and if this spinal root supplies this whole skin, we say that this is the dermatome number C5. So based upon the physiological testing, based upon the anatomical models, we have already mapped and we have already noted the various dermatomes that are supplied by some corresponding nerve roots. So here in front of you, not in any order, we have just mentioned that in the upper limb we have all these spinal roots or radicular nerves that supply the upper limb. Starts from your shoulder and up till your thumb and the fingers. Similarly in the lower limb, starting from your L1 up till your S1, S4, you have different spinal radicular nerves or roots that again supply your different part of the leg, thigh and pelvis area. And now you see here for the trunk also we have all these dermatomes. So this is plain simple anatomy and physiology information. For clinical point of view, because there can be some overlapping also, and there can be some more muscles and all those things. So clinically we have identified more specifically one area in the order of from shoulder to arm to thumb to finger to all these things. So you can see that if I again draw a body, a human body like this, right? So this is your one side of the body, and this is the contralateral side. So, roughly I am drawing. So from shoulder onwards, from this part onwards, because above one is the cranial part, the cranial nerve will feed those areas, so we do not have a nerve root here. So from this part onward, we have the posterior shoulder aspect, and that is supplied by C4. The lateral aspect of upper arm, lateral means this side will beside the lateral upper arm. You can see the area of middle deltoid and all those things, supplied by the C5. In the medial aspect of the lower arm, that will be T1. The tip of the thumb, it is supplied by the sixth root of the cervical segment. Then you have the tip of the middle finger, and so on. You have the tip of the little finger. You have the thorax, or at the lipal level, because thorax is a larger area, so we have to further specify it. So there is at the nipple level you have the T5 for the thorax again, but the lower side, that is the umbilical level, is T10. The upper part of the upper leg is L2. The lower medial part of the upper leg, that means the thigh, L3. You have the medial lower leg, L4, and so on. So all of the foot is supplied by S1. So as I said, a good and efficient screening examination is a key for an efficient and an effective and a positive sensory examination. So these 13 points are going to serve as a huge lot of things in favor of the comfortable and a well set examination. So now we do the screening examination. So first of all, where at all we should go for a sensory examination. So if sensory complaints predominate, or if you suspect that there should be some sensory loss, then only we should go for a sensory examination. Otherwise there is no need to unnecessarily bother a patient with the sensory examination. And this is something very, very important, that throughout the sensory examination the eyes of the patient should be closed. Because let's say we are trying to prick pin into a patient's skin somewhere. Now if the pin is staying in front of the patient on some table, or if you have picked the pin from the table and the patient is looking at it, now you ask your patient to close your eyes and say that what do you feel. He understands that you have taken a pin. So even if he is not feeling exactly a pin prick, maybe he is feeling a touch or a pain, but he is not feeling a pin prick. So he would say that it is a pin prick, because he has already seen that there is a pin which you have picked from the table in just for the test. So same way, if someone understands that what is the tuning for, like the students up till 12th class, or the students of engineering, or maybe a common man also, sometimes if they have some previous experience of a tuning fork, so they all know that tuning fork is for vibration. So when you pick up a tuning fork from a table in front of the patient, and now you ask later, when the patient has already seen that you have picked the tuning fork, you ask the patient to close the eyes. So he understands now that you are going to give some vibration to the patient. You do it and he would say that there are some vibrations, even if there is no vibration felt by him. He has just felt some touch of the tuning fork, or he has just felt something but not the vibration, but he would say that it is vibration. So throughout the examination the eyes should be closed. If you find that the patient is not comfortable closing eyes for a longer duration, you can stop the test for some while and then again resume your testing. But whenever you are testing, try to do it with the patient throughout the duration of the sensory examination with the closed eyes. And the best is if you can give some kind of eye vision screens, or some kind of glasses which make the patient blind, so that the patient is not clenching also the eyes, he is not getting fatigue also, and he doesn't have any opportunity to open the eyes also, and you are assured that throughout the examination it was done with the closed eyes. Now the other thing is, when you are applying cold, or when you are applying heat, or when you are applying touch, so you know that there is a threshold value. There is a threshold value for all these things. So threshold value is a minimum intensity which is required to elicit a stimulation. So try to give the sensation in a very light manner. So they should be done in a very light manner, so that suppose the threshold is 60 and you give a stimulation of 200, so obviously the patient will be able to make out. So we should be on the borderline. So if we know that a very light touch should be given, so only a very light touch should be given. If we know that how to prick up pin on the skin, we should do it in a very light manner, because we are interested only in the pin prick sensation. If you just kill your patient with pin prick, obviously he will have some pain and he will say that yes, I am having pin prick, but that is not exactly the stimulation which should be there with the pin prick. So if you do a temperature test, if you just burn someone's skin, he would definitely say that I have some heat felt. But if you do it around let's say 38, 40, 45 degrees Celsius, 50 degrees Celsius, so maybe he is not able to markedly make out that what exactly have you done on the skin, and then your actual sensory examination starts. So try to be around the threshold values and don't be very high or very much on the side of application of the stimulation. And now you know that if you have spinothalamic involvement, we have already done this, that you have pain, temperature, all these things gone. If you have the dorsal column involvement, you will have vibration, you know, the fasciculus gracilis and fasciculus cutaneus. If all these things are gone, you will have the vibration and proprioceptions and other things gone. So and if you find that sensations are fine but stereognosis is affected or graphesthesia is affected, you know that it is going to be a cerebral cortex or hemispheric, because you know the cerebral cortex are cerebral hemispheres, right and left. So you already know all these things, so these will help you in further planning your screening test. So should I go for a hemispheric test, stereognosis, graphesthesia, or should I go for a vibration test, or I should go for a pain or temperature test? So now if we start with the examination of pain first, so it is a very simple examination, as you know that the procedure is not controlled by any equipment or so. So basically you have to prick the part of the skin with which you want to see the pin prick sensation. So you do it with a pen either, or you do it with a toothpick, and of course it should be a sterilized one or it should be a disposable one, so that there is no chance of infection. And you do it suddenly. For a vibration, you normally use a 128 hertz tuning fork, so that is clinically done by these things. And when you are doing these light touch sensory testing, you should always compare the results of distal versus the proximal sides, because you know in your neuropathy there is always a pattern that proximal is affected first or distal is affected first, upper limb is affected first or lower limb is affected first, right side is gone or the left side is gone. So all these will give you huge amount of information about the underlying pathology, because there is decussation, there is sparing also sometime of some fibers. So all these things are there. So one must consider when you are doing a test, do it for distal also, proximal also, right also, left also, so that you have a clear picture about all these testing and their outcomes. Similarly, for proprioception, the clinician should start the testing with the fingers and toes first. Like if you have finger or thumb in your hand, you ask the patient to keep in closed eyes position, and you move it, and you see that okay, he is able to recognize that I am moving it in or out or whatever. So these are the things. And when you find that there are losses of stereognosis are found in fingers or toes, then you go for the larger joints and re-establish that stereognosis is a problem with this patient. One more thing, that before going for higher tests like stereognosis or graphesthesia, these are the tests of higher perceptual capacities. You know, stereognosis is not a simple test. It is a sensation which is built up by many sensations, like 2-point discrimination, touch, fine touch, crude touch, maybe sometime pressure also. Same way the graphesthesia. So if the basic sensations are absent, or if basic sensations are not present, then there is no point doing graphesthesia or stereognosis, because in any case you are going to get them affected, because the basic sensations are, and all these higher order sensations are built up on the information that is given by the basic sensations. So if you are doing stereognosis or graphesthesia, ensure that the smaller or the basic sensations are present, and if they are affected, very lightly if they are affected, then you may try these tests clinically. One more thing, that if there is these kind of disorders or clinical findings, stereognosis or graphesthesia, they are due to the contralateral hemispheric diseases. That is one thing, because you know that before the level of cortex, at the level of medulla, these fibers decussate. But if you have the basic sensations already affected, so there is no way you can differentiate that whether you have graphesthesia or stereognosis because of basic sensation loss or because of hemispheric disease. So if you get these disorders or these clinical findings or these dysfunction, and you have in addition the basic sensations also lost, then there is no way you can distinguish between whether this graphesthesia or stereognosis difficulty is due to the peripheral lesion of the basic sensorium, or it is due to the central contralateral hemispheric disease. So this is one point one must understand. And the last comment before we actually start the clinical examination of the sensations one by one is that we need to understand that normally the basic sensations are not much affected in the higher or in the cortical or in the cerebral cortex lesions, as I have previously also discussed, because in the brain the representation is very large for a very small area sensation. So if this is your brain, now you know in the brain you have thousands and lakhs of fibers, and all these fibers have a lot of interconnections, and each and every area of body is represented by a particular area in the brain. So in the brain everything is distributed. So in a cortical lesion, even if a small lesion is injured or having some severity or some disease, maybe the collaterals or the interneurons, and you know that there is a decussation between the two cerebral hemispheres also. If I draw it in this way, if you can see both the cerebral hemispheres, you know you have some fibers decussating to the other side also. If these are the cerebral hemispheres, some fibers cross from right to left and some fibers cross from left to right. So there is always the decussation of the fibers to the opposite side. तो इसलिए अगर ब्रेन के इस तरफ कोई प्रॉब्लम होती भी है तो मे बी कुछ फाइबर यहाँ के यहाँ चले गए हैं, तो यहाँ का ब्रेन ठीक है, तो उस वजह से हमारा काम चल जाता है. Or because there are lot of interconnections, interneurons, so even if some fibers are gone, maybe their collaterals. Suppose there is a fiber like this, but it has a collateral here like this, and it is connected to a fiber here like this. So something like this. So if there is a problem here, maybe from this side information can come, or from this side information can come. So before the information dies, information is actually killed by some disease. Maybe the information is finding its way to some other channel, and finally you get your things done. It's like a sponge. You know, you have a sponge here like this, and you keep the whole sponge in water, and this is now completely filled with water. Now if you make a part of the sponge dry by some dryer, and you press it from anywhere, you will find that the water has found its roots here. So this part will always be wet if major part of the sponge is wet. तो अगर एक छोटे से पार्ट में कोई परेशानी हम कर भी देते हैं, क्योंकि वो स्पॉन्ज में इतने ज़्यादा पोर्स होते हैं और सारे पोर्स आपस में मिले होते हैं, देयर आर लॉट ऑफ चैनल्स, सो देयर इज always a possibility that the fluid or the water from several places can come and enter into this smaller area. So if a small area is affected in cerebral cortex, there are chances that the information can pass on, or due to the other cerebral hemisphere the information is already there to the other brain also. So the loss is not much. Even if in the acute condition you find that there is a severe loss of all these sensations, very quickly after some time you find that all these sensations are regained. So this loss is very short lived. अगर शुरू में मरीज को लगता भी है कि मेरे को टच समझ नहीं आ रहा, मुझे पिन प्रिक समझ नहीं आ रहा, मुझे हीट समझ नहीं आ रहा, लेकिन थोड़े ही दिनों में all these sensations come back and you find that they are there at the normal or the routine level, and you find them absolutely pre-morbid level. So this is something very fantastic that the brain has done, that you have interconnections, you have decussation, you have crossing. So even if a slight part of the brain is slightly damaged, there are chances that unless you have a very large area affected, there are chances that the sensations will be regained to the normal level. So these were the opening comments and notes for starting, accomplishing, executing a sensory examination, which should start with a intelligent and a quick and a tricky history taking and interview, as I said, and that should lead to your screening examination, and a screening examination will give you further cues to enter into the detailed and a specific examination we will be doing in the coming classes. Thank you.